Discover the amazing truth, how 7 days transformed my life from comparison to self-acceptance. Sarah stood in the shadows of her small classroom, the grain silos peeking through the dusty window, reminding her of the weight that loomed over her, much like her family's legacy. She had carved out a niche teaching art, surrounded by splashes of color and creativity, yet felt suffocated by the drab expectations that haunted her, a contrast stark as black and white. Her younger brother, Jake, was a tech whiz, basking in accolades while she melted into the backdrop of her family's esteemed medical lineage. It was a life measured by success in dollars and degrees, leaving her own passion for art feeling trivial, overshadowed by personas that sparkled in the eyes of everyone around her. The walls of her childhood home echoed with praises of her parents. Both were celebrated doctors, champions of academic achievement. "When will you find your purpose?" they often pressed, their words empty as they slid into a repeated pattern of anticipation for a title she had yet to claim. "What's holding you back, Sarah?" weighed on her like a shroud. Struggling with absurd standards created an internal war. Self-worth shattered against a backdrop of societal expectations, leaving her soul to bind itself in insecurities. On the morning of her pivotal week, Sarah received a call that shattered her routine. Her grandmother had passed away. Grief hit hard, fracturing the already precarious grip she had on her sense of self. Amidst the swirling emotions, she found a hidden journal in the attic, its leather cover softened with age, inviting her into a world where creativity had been both stifled and celebrated. Every page turned revealed a saga of resilience, a juxtaposition of passion forsaken for familial duties. The ink-laden words told her of a woman who had fought against the unseen tide of expectation, offering her insight into a life of blending dreams with realities. As she delved deeper, internal upheaval spread like wildfire. Her grandmother's struggles seemed to resonate with her own muted desire for artistic expression. A pain-filled but electric connection sparked within. She could visualize her grandmother poring over inky canvases while balancing motherhood, a vivid juxtaposition to her own seemingly mundane existence. Yet another layer of anguish stirred. Her estranged father's voice echoed through her thoughts. "Art is for those who can't achieve real success," he'd said, shoving another disdainful reminder into her already spiraled thoughts. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. The emotional swings pushed her closer to creation, but further from self-acceptance. Thin strands of determination fought against the suffocating fear of judgment. Ideas of a showcase rattled in her mind, raw pieces born from the depths of grief and the need for liberation. Yet nagging whispers urged her to freeze. What if it flopped? Would anyone care? Her heart would race with anticipation, yet the weight of Jake's technological triumphs loomed like dark clouds over her emerging light. That evening, under the fluorescent lights of her classroom, she began to paint. Every stroke became an outlet despite her racing mind and racing thoughts. But just as she captured the silence of her evolving voice on the canvas, a buzz broke the stillness. Jake's message flashed on her phone, a new innovation, the very same arena where her success had faltered. Joy spiraled momentarily into despair, making her question everything. She was left standing at a crossroad, the applause of the upcoming audience ringing in her ears, begging the question. Could she give herself permission to be more than a shadow? Would her art hold meaning in the face of modern success? As Sarah stood paralyzed by her ambitions and fears, she felt the fluorescent hum above her almost mocking her indecision. The paintbrush hung limply between her fingers, a tool for release now replaced with a vessel for her anxiety. Memories flooded her mind, the countless hours spent perfecting every line, every shade, but somehow feeling unworthy of her creations. She needed to break free from the self-imposed chains of expectation, yet the fear of failure gnawed at her insides like a relentless beast. She took a deep breath, desperate for clarity. Inside the confines of her bedroom later that night, she could still hear the pealing echoes of her father's voice, critical, unyielding. Yet, as she sat in the flickering glow of her desk lamp, the world felt different. The journal lay open beside her. The words from her grandmother now simmered in her brain like a soft hum of encouragement. What would her grandmother have done in moments like this? Would she have buried her creativity deeper or dared to confront it? With shaky resolve, Sarah leaned down, pen in hand, and began to infuse her thoughts into the pages. Each word acted as a brushstroke against her insecurities, crafting a narrative of possibility, of reclaiming her voice. Frustration gave way to clarity as she poured out her aspirations. A showcase, not just as an artist, but as a storyteller. Someone who could communicate what it was to feel lost, yet determined. She found herself scribbling plans. The sketches flowed with the same passion she poured onto her canvas. Each phrase felt like an act of rebellion against the standards that had stifled her for so long. My voice matters. My art matters. The ink became a manifesto of sorts, a proclamation against the fear that had loomed over her existence like a black cloud. The next morning, the sunlight broke through her window, casting rays upon her scattered papers, illuminating her new resolve. Sarah decided to take a step that felt monumental, yet terrifying. She would reach out to her former classmates from art school, people who had once shared her enthusiasm, her dreams. Connecting with them could offer not just reassurance, but inspiration. Perhaps they too had navigated the treacherous waters of self-doubt. What had they accomplished? Would they understand her struggle? With each word she tapped out on her phone, the tightness in her chest began to ease. Her intentions shifted from fear to connection, a bridge toward acceptance. Hey everyone, it's been a while. I'm planning a small showcase of my recent work. I'd love to catch up and would value your feedback. Just before she hit send, a familiar wave of doubt surged. What if they scoffed? What if nobody cared? But deep down, she recognized the inevitable truth. She had to risk vulnerability if she ever wished to forge an authentic path. With a swift press of her finger, she sent the message out into the void, a vibrant seed of courage planted amongst the chill of uncertainty. Regardless of the response, she had already taken the leap, an affirmation that it was okay to be more than just a footnote in someone else's life. As she returned to her canvas, the images began to crystallize in her mind. The rawness of her grief transformed into stories of hope. Each stroke was imbued with newfound energy. The gravity of self-judgment slowly lifted off her shoulders. But just as she immersed herself back into creation, her phone buzzed insistently from across the room. With a frisson of excitement coursing through her, she left the easel behind and walked toward the device, the aura of possibility crackling in the air. What awaited her on the screen loomed with the promise of connection, confrontation, or perhaps the clarity she'd long sought. As the news flashed before her, she felt her heart race. Sarah had opened a door, but what would stand on the other side? Would it lead her closer to acceptance, or would it offer yet another reminder of the battles she had yet to confront? As Sarah peered at her phone, a bittersweet cocktail of anticipation and anxiety churned within her. The screen lit up with a cascade of replies. Her former classmates had responded, a whirlwind of encouragement mingled with shared stories of struggle and triumph. Some had faced more daunting setbacks than she'd ever imagined, while others crafted their own paths of insecurity into works of art. Her heart raced as she navigated through their messages, feeling a community form around her, one that had been absent for too long. "Your art is amazing. You've always had a special way of seeing the world," one friend wrote. The warmth of those words seeped into her skin, dissolving some of the barriers she'd erected against praise over the years. For the first time, Sarah felt the tentative threads of weaving together her fragmented self-esteem. Still, persistent fears lingered, shadows at the edges of her newfound glow. Perhaps she was merely fooling herself. A small voice whispered that this was just a temporary escape, a mirage disguising the reality of disappointment that might await her at the showcase. What if she failed to capture her dreams? Would this burst of connection wilt under the weight of expectation? Yet those doubts served as fuel. Drawing on the enthusiasm and shared vulnerability of her peers, she turned back to her canvas, feeling emboldened to meld her deeper emotions onto the surface. The strokes felt both more daring and more honest, as if the layers of paint expressed not just her artistic talents, but her authentic self. With every flourish of the brush, she confronted the specter of her past failures, transforming them into strokes of resilience. Unexpectedly, her creative process began to shift. She found herself experimenting with new techniques, vibrant colors splashing across the canvas in defiance of her usual somber palette. The process felt like liberation, as if she were breaking through an invisible barrier that had restrained her for years. She captured stories of joy amidst sorrow, painting the struggles that felt like shackles, but now danced freely through her newfound expressive framework. Days passed and her excitement grew as she prepared for the showcase. Each morning unfolded with purpose, her messages exchanging back and forth with friends, igniting a collective enthusiasm. Sarah began to recognize that this showcase was not just about lifting her art up, but also embracing the bond of shared experiences, the highs and lows of artistry intertwined with personal growth. However, as preparations entered the final stage, a familiar surge of panic gripped her chest. It was a gnawing sensation, one that told her she was unworthy, that her art was merely a mask for her imperfections. She found herself staring at a piece that felt especially raw and personal, a reflection of her chaotic journey through grief and self-doubt. It held the weight of everything she'd fought against, and she wondered whether it would resonate or alienate her audience. Clenching her jaw, Sarah resolved to face that fear head-on. She reminded herself that vulnerability would be her greatest ally, a bridge that could connect her experiences to those who looked upon her work. In embracing the raw and the real, perhaps she could create a dialogue, not just about art, but about what it means to rise from the ashes of uncertainty. As the day of the showcase approached, Sarah felt a palpable tension in the air, a mix of anticipation and dread. She found comfort in the connection she'd nurtured with her classmates, weaving their stories with her own into her preparation. But where would this journey lead her? What she hadn't prepared for was the unexpected confrontation looming ahead. The night before the showcase, just as she settled down to review her artwork, an unexpected text buzzed on her phone. The repercussions of her courage had begun to unfurl, and the message bore an invitation that threatened to draw her into a deeper conflict, one that could either shatter her resolve or solidify her rebirth. Feeling the weight of her choices crystallize, Sarah braced herself for what lay ahead. Did she have the strength to embrace all that was about to unfold? Would it pull her further into her fears or thrust her into a new chapter of self-acceptance? Only time would tell. Her story was teetering on the precipice of transformation, waiting for the moment to break free. As Sarah stared at her phone, heart thudding in rhythm with her rising anxiety, she read the message once more. An invitation to a private reception hosted by a well-respected critic. It felt simultaneously exhilarating and suffocating. The critic's presence loomed large in the world of art, likely weighing her work against standards she questioned but had only begun to challenge. Was this a test of her newfound courage or another door to potential humiliation? Despite the trembling uncertainty within, a small ember of determination ignited in her chest. This was a fork in her journey. She could either retreat into the safety of her familiar doubts or seize the moment to confront the opposing tides of fear and aspiration. Gathering her thoughts, Sarah reminded herself that her art was not merely a reflection of skill, but a testament to her journey through grief and doubt. Each brushstroke bore witness to her growth, the story she had dared to tell. Decisions took hold. She needed to prepare not only her artwork, but herself, mind and soul, for whatever awaited her. In the light of the final hours before the showcase, Sarah arranged her pieces, allowing their presence to speak her truth, vibrant, chaotic, real. But as she stood before a particularly raw painting, the weight of her vulnerability pressed heavily against her chest. This piece encapsulated her struggle, a kaleidoscope of emotions laid bare, a stark contrast to the polished, genteel art often favored by critics. Her hands shook as she reached for a brush. What if she was misunderstood? What if her authenticity was dismissed as amateurish sentiment? Yet, mingled with these chaotic thoughts was the familiar push that had driven her creation, a visceral need to connect, to share her reality with those willing to listen. Taking a deep breath, she painted, letting her emotions flow with unfiltered honesty. Each stroke reaffirmed her resolve. She had battled silence and self-doubt. Now she claimed her voice. As night edged toward dawn, she felt the exhaustion seep into her bones, but not without a sense of accomplishment. The fatigue felt different, laced with purpose. Her art emerged as a reflection not of the artist she was expected to be, but of who she truly was. Tapping into her deepest fears forged a fire within her. Each scenario running through her mind of potential judgment morphed into motivations for deeper exploration. The showcase day dawned bright, carrying the hopes and weight of her preparations. Standing in the dim light of her studio, she cast one final look at her pieces, a quiet moment of allegiance between her past and her growing self-acceptance. The reception was imminent, a convergence of aspirations and anxieties, and Sarah locked her gaze onto the remaining pieces as if they were keys to unlocking something monumental within her. Armed with vulnerability, she ventured into the daylight, sculpting her narrative one step at a time, battling her lingering doubts with the shield of authenticity. Upon arrival, a sea of faces and handfuls of whispers awaited her, each mingling with excitement and trepidation. This was a congregation of critics, creatives, and kindred spirits. Some admired her art, others were indifferent, but everything hinged on how she would navigate their perceptions. The first few conversations flowed smoothly, and Sarah found herself revealing snippets of her artistic journey. However, as the crowd thickened, her confidence wavered momentarily. The critics' gaze finally landed on her work. There it was, a solitary moment where the air thickened with electricity. Would they understand her? Could her rawness resonate, or would it be deemed inconsequential? Just as she prepared to step forward and assert herself, a voice broke through the din. It was an unexpectedly familiar one, echoing the doubts she fought so hard to quell. They'll never appreciate the real you," it sneered, a chilling reminder of her internal battles. But Sarah was no longer the timid artist she once was. Her journey had crafted resilience where uncertainty once thrived. The moment hung before her like suspended color on a canvas, and she realized the challenge ahead soon required her courage and authenticity in spades. She was about to confront not only the critics, but also the deepest question of all. Could she embrace her truth enough to soar beyond comparison? She took a deep breath, ready to leap. What lay on the other side of this confrontation could define her path in ways she never anticipated. Would she rise or falter in the face of judgment? The critic approached, their eyes sharp and discerning, as if weighing the worth of not just the canvas in front of them, but the artist standing beside it. Sarah felt the weight of their scrutiny, like an invisible hand pressing down on her shoulders, squeezing the breath from her lungs. She swallowed hard, feeling the pulse of uncertainty hammering in her throat, but she was determined to stand her ground. Beneath the surface, her thoughts churned with a potent mix of self-doubt and defiance. What if I'm not enough? Yet, as she observed the earnest expressions of those around her who were genuinely engaged with her work, she felt a flicker of resilience, a reminder that her art was a manifestation of her truth, her journey through pain to clarity. In this charged atmosphere, every conversation felt like a tightrope walk. With each new interaction, the sentiment that enveloped her loomed large, containing both potential admiration and crippling judgment. As she answered questions about her inspiration and technique, she intentionally veered toward the stories that shaped her art. Her past, not just a source of pain, was also a crucible where creativity was forged. "Your work is so raw," a fellow artist remarked, their voice tinged with awe. "It's like you've poured your heart onto the canvas. It's beautiful." The words hung in the air, weaving through the tension, mingling with her swirling thoughts. Could her vulnerability, so recently a source of fear, actually become a beacon for others? But amidst the encouragement, the shrill echo of her internal critic persisted, reminding her that momentary validation could quickly dissolve. "What if they tire of your story?" it taunted. "What if raw just means unpolished?" Gathering her breath, she stepped back into the room, integrating her resolve into her presence. This was not just a display of her art, it was an exhibition of her spirit, unfiltered, undeniable. She moved toward the painting that embodied her struggle. It demanded attention, radiating unspoken words. "This piece," she gestured, energy cascading through her, "represents the chaos of loss and healing. It's messy, and it's okay that it is." Silence stretched momentarily, a hopeful pause before the onslaught of words. She could hear her heartbeat echo in the following hum of discourse surrounding her, alive and thrilling. One of the critics approached, curiosity shimmering in their gaze. "What do you hope people will take away from your work?" The question, simple yet profound, hung between them like a thread waiting for her to weave it into something greater. Tension coiled in her stomach, but she now recognized the power of her authenticity as a weapon against the rising tide of self-sabotage. "I want them to feel," she said, her voice steady, "to confront their own truths, however uncomfortable they may be. Art should be a mirror reflecting our struggles, so we don't feel alone in them." For the first time, the critic nodded, and something shifted. They were no longer a looming figure of judgment, but a potential ally, an opportunities harbinger, instead of a sword poised to slice her ambitions apart. As people continued to engage with her, sharing their interpretations and stories touched by her work, Sarah began to feel a change within herself. Each dialogue carved away layers of doubt, revealing the core of self-acceptance she'd sought for so long. Gratefulness mingled with disbelief. Had she just begun to find her voice, so vividly articulated now for the world to see? But the journey ahead pulsed beneath the surface, unresolved yet full of promise. While that night had illuminated her path, cracks of uncertainty remained beneath her burgeoning confidence. She could sense the path would not smooth over. It would lead to further confrontations, deeper exploration of her truth. As she navigated these relationships, the urge for validation lingered, thrilling yet dangerous. One question lingered like a shadow at the edge of her consciousness. Could her growth withstand the inevitable storms? Or was the embrace of change merely the calm before a turbulent reality? Resolved to confront the next challenge, she realized she was just beginning to unravel the boundaries of self-acceptance. The question loomed larger. What deeper truths did she still need to uncover to fully embrace the artist she wished to be? And so, invigorated yet anxious, she prepared to dig deeper, aware that the true test had only just begun. It was time to confront not only external perceptions, but the insidious beliefs she had yet to face. Where would this new journey take her? In the days that followed the exhibition, Sarah felt the pulse of possibility resonate within her. Each morning brought a soft brightness that was different from before, a sense of renewal coursing through her veins. Yet alongside this promising energy, there lay the murky depths of apprehension, tailing her like a shadow, whispering doubts of whether she'd be able to sustain this newfound confidence. She started with a practice of journaling, inviting her thoughts to spill freely onto the page. It wasn't just about writing, it was a tangible strategy to sever her ties with the self-criticism that had long held her captive. She detailed her fears alongside moments of clarity, digging deep into the layers of her psyche that had previously been too sensitive or painful to poke. Each word was a thread, weaving a narrative that shifted between triumph and vulnerability. "I am enough," she penned repeatedly, hoping the act of putting this affirmation into words would soften the hard edges of her self-doubt. But even as she attempted to sow seeds of belief, the inner critic sneered at her, demanding evidence. The nagging notion that no one truly knew the struggle she faced, that they might not care to know, clung stubbornly to her. Still, she pressed on. Art had always served as a refuge for her, a sanctuary to explore the uncomfortable truths. Yet it also demanded exploration beyond the canvas. When she discovered an upcoming workshop focusing on the emotional connections between artist and audience, she hesitated. The very idea of sharing her personal journey felt vulnerable and frightening, but perhaps that was precisely what she needed. Attending required a leap of faith, an acceptance that her artistry could evolve how she connected with others. That Sunday morning, as she walked into the sun-drenched studio, anxiety twisted in her stomach like a coiled spring, but her determination propelled her onward. The group was small, intimate, and surprisingly warm. She sensed a camaraderie, a shared understanding of artistic struggle that resonated deeply within her. "Let's start with a simple exercise," the instructor suggested, her tone encouraging. "Pair up and discuss an emotion you've experienced through your art. Be raw, be real. Let's peel back the layers." As Sarah stood opposite another artist, a wave of vulnerability washed over her. Could she truly disclose the tumult of her experiences? She felt her throat constrict, the words catching in her chest. Yet with each she affirmed silently that to be an artist was to reveal and engage. Slowly, her story unfolded, a narrative shaped by pain, resilience, and the unyielding pursuit of her voice. She watched her partner nod, eyes misty, as they reciprocated with their own raw confessions, revealing their struggles of identity, loss, and disconnection. In that exchange, Sarah discovered an untamed power within herself. There was healing in the shared vulnerability, a connection that rippled between them. Weeks passed in a blur of creative fervor as she dove deeper into her art while nurturing these newfound bonds. Yet, as her connections deepened, so did the unease within her. Would they accept her truth? Would they judge her for what had been so harrowing? Every time she faced her easel, the question nagged. Was she ready to show, not just her work, but her soul? The calm that wrapped around her was punctuated by the rising tension of the next workshop, where participants would present a piece infused with their emotional journey. It was a chance to transform their personal revelations into art. Would her own canvas reflect the raw honesty she'd come to embrace? Or would the specter of judgment dampen her resolve? Rabid anticipation built inside her as she prepared to face the unveiling. What deeper truths would she have to confront to reveal the soul of her artistic identity? And when that moment arrived, could she withstand the pressure of exposing her vulnerabilities to the world? One thing was certain: Sarah was standing on the precipice of a significant revelation, one that could redefine her path and her art forever. Would she find the courage to leap into the unknown? As the day of the presentation approached, Sarah found herself in a tumultuous sea of emotions, anxiety, excitement, dread, and hope all swirling together. Each night she sat at her easel, brush in hand, staring at the blank canvas that loomed before her like a stark reminder of her fears. The colors seemed to mock her indecision, a silent challenge demanding she choose. What if the piece she created wasn't enough to convey the depth of her experience? The idea of baring her soul before her peers felt like traversing a tightrope, each step on the canvas a potential slip into inadequacy. The vivid hues of her palette became a battleground between the desire to express her truth and the overwhelming fear that she might fail. And yet she clung desperately to the shift she had felt since the workshop, a whisper of potential. In the stillness of her studio, she pored over her journal entries, searching for the thread that bound her intricate emotions together. How could she illustrate the aching loneliness of being misunderstood, the bubbling resilience forged from pain? She realized that her artistic voice had been muted for too long, subsumed by the anxiety of comparison, draining the vibrancy from her work and ultimately her identity. With renewed determination, she began layering paint onto the canvas. Blues for sorrow, reds for anger, and golden yellows for hope. As each stroke flowed from her heart, she felt a liberation, an unraveling of the tightly wound springs of self-doubt. This was not just about showing art, this was about unveiling herself, not the polished facade, but the jagged, raw truth of her journey. The revelation felt like stepping into an open field after being trapped in a dark room for years. With brush in hand, Sarah confronted her emotions head-on. She discovered that vulnerability was not a weakness, but a powerful tool to connect. The expression of her pain became a bridge, inviting others into her world rather than pushing them away. Each color and texture mirrored her experiences. Fear, beauty, sorrow, and joy intertwined on the canvas. But just as her confidence began to swell within her, doubt wormed its way back in, unfurling questions that twisted her stomach. What if her audience didn't resonate with her truth? What if they only saw flaws, the imperfections she so desperately tried to mask? The gnawing voices of insecurity echoed louder, wrestling for control over her thoughts. In need of clarity, she reached for her journal and carefully penned her fears, crafting a new entry. Art is my truth. As long as it reflects my journey, it will find its rightful place. The act of writing renewed her conviction. She needed to trust her instincts. Sarah realized that the judgment she feared was less important than the authenticity she craved. As the sun dipped into the horizon, casting a warm glow over her studio, Sarah knew she was on the cusp of something monumental. Soon, she would share not just a painting, but her heart, a piece forged through struggles and triumphs. Would she find validation in her peers, or, more importantly, within herself? The impending presentation loomed like a storm on the horizon, promising change and challenge. Sarah clenched her brush tighter, the anticipation surging within her like a current. The moment had come to face her fear head-on. Nothing would be the same after this, and she was both terrified and exhilarated. Could this act of courage be the key to unlocking the next chapter of her life? What awaited her on the other side of that canvas remained a mystery, but she knew one thing. It was time to share her truth with the world. As dawn broke, painting the studio in soft pastels, Sarah felt a sense of urgency blossom within her. Today was the day she had both anticipated and dreaded in equal measure. With every pulse of her heart, familiar doubts scuttled through her mind. Today's presentation loomed like an impending storm, closer than ever before. She faced a critical juncture, one that could either solidify her emerging identity as an artist or send her spiraling back into self-doubt. Sipping her lukewarm coffee, she glanced at the painting half-finished in front of her. Each stroke of bold color felt like a declaration of her existence, but just as that exhilarating thought took root, the heavy shackles of fear rattled in her veins. Her heart raced as the clock ticked down. amplifying the pressure she had silently applied to herself. This was not just an exercise in creativity, it was a confrontation with her innermost fears and insecurities. She could hear the whispers of her past critics echoing through her mind, their words like daggers aimed at her confidence. The anxiety surged. Had she learned enough in the workshop? Would her painting resonate, or would it be met with apathy? What if, in a moment of raw exposure, she stumbled and revealed her vulnerabilities to an unforgiving audience? Then she recalled her journal entry, "Art is my truth." Those words, an anchor in the deluge of uncertainty, began to soothe her spiraling thoughts. With a deep breath, she returned to the canvas. Her hands, stained with paint and laden with emotions, hovered above it like a conductor preparing to lead a symphony. Each color was not merely pigment, it represented a fragment of the journey that shaped her, formative memories of joy and sorrow sewn intricately together. As the morning stretched on, the sun streamed in through the window, igniting the colors of her painting. In that illumination, she saw more than a mere image. She recognized the narrative unfolding with each layer she added, a story of reclamation. Her brush danced across the canvas, transforming confusion into clarity. Slowly but surely, the act of creating became therapeutic, instilling a deep-seated purpose within her. Yet with every stroke came a mounting pressure. Was her narrative compelling enough? Would others see it as she did? Questions spiraled through her mind as she rushed to complete the work before time slipped through her fingers. But just as her instincts clamored for perfection, she paused. What if perfection was not the goal? What if finding authenticity in her expression mattered more than securing approval? In that moment of realization, she felt an internal shift. The anxieties began to recede, replaced by a quiet confidence. She decided that whatever happened today, she would own her truth. This presentation was an invitation for others to see her, not just as an artist, but as a person who had journeyed through the shadows to reach the light. Gathering her things, Sarah took a final look at the painting, now vibrant with life and layered emotions. This artwork encapsulated not just her past struggles, but also her newfound strength, a testament to her evolution. As she stepped outside into the crisp air, ready to face her fears, she felt a spark of exhilaration replace the fear. She was embarking on a new phase, one defined by her courage to be vulnerable. Little did Sarah know, as she approached the venue, that this act of sharing her truth would unveil even deeper layers of herself. The stakes were about to escalate. What awaited her could challenge everything she believed about validation and artistry. What unexpected truths would emerge when she finally opened the door? As Sarah stepped into the venue, a palpable hum of anticipation washed over her. The walls were adorned with vibrant artworks, each piece a testament to creativity unleashed. Yet all she could focus on was the pounding of her heart, a metronome marking the seconds crunching towards her moment in the spotlight. She clenched the handle of her portfolio tightly, reminding herself of her commitment to truth, her own truth. Amidst the mingling crowd, she caught fragments of conversations, laughter, and even criticism, a harsh reminder that despite the joyous atmosphere, judgment hovered like an uninvited guest. How could she expunge the lingering fears that whispered she didn't belong here? The warmth of the sunlight filtering through the large windows contrasted sharply with the chill deep within her, as though they were two worlds separated by mere steps. Sarah scanned the faces around her, searching for a sign of encouragement among the unfamiliar. Each smile ignited a flicker of hope, yet the deeper insecurity simmered below. What if they only smiled to be polite? Could she truly connect with anyone in this space, or was this yet another room where comparison would thrive, sucking her into a vortex of self-doubt? With every passing moment, the weight of expectation pressed down harder. It felt as if each artist around her was polished, confident in their own mastery, a stark contrast to her raw emotions laid bare on the canvas. Suddenly, she felt the urge to retreat. But retreating would only validate her fears. She couldn't let vulnerability become her prison. Instead, she focused on each breath, consciously slowing down the frantic rhythm pounding in her chest. When her turn at the podium finally arrived, the world around her faded into a blur. As she approached the easel set up beside her, a wave of resolve washed over her. She glanced at her painting, its vibrant colors serving as a reminder of her journey, the late nights filled with uncertainty, the bursts of creativity, and the very act of embracing her own flaws. This was not merely paint on canvas, it was a manifestation of her growth. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice trembling slightly but growing steadier with each word. "Today, I want to share with you not just my art, but also a piece of my heart." As she spoke, Sarah observed the audience, searching for engagement. Faces began to morph from mere spectators into attentive listeners. In that moment, something shifted within her. She lived each word, recalling the struggles that shaped her, allowing the layers of vulnerability to peel away. It was a reflection of her journey from comparison to self-acceptance. In that crucible of honesty, she felt liberated, shed of the weight of conforming to an external narrative. With each sentence, doubt transformed into empowerment, fear into a testament of resilience. However, as she neared the conclusion, a confrontation loomed. A singular thought pierced through her moment of clarity. What if no one resonated with her story? Would they dismiss her as just another aspiring artist? Nevertheless, as adrenaline coursed through her, she leaned into her truth. She was not the doubts of her past. She was the expression of her present. Art is not just about perfection, it's about authenticity. Today, I invite you to embrace your own journey, to explore the beautiful chaos within you. As her declaration hung in the air, a ripple of recognition spread through the audience. There was something electric in the room, a connection sparked by her vulnerability. And just as she stepped down from the podium, exhilaration gushed through her, mixed with a hint of fear. Would they understand her now? Would they accept her story? The answers loomed larger than life as she exited the stage. Yet as the applause erupted, drowning out her uncertainty momentarily, a familiar face emerged from the crowd. Someone from her past, an unwelcome reminder of old insecurities. What would happen when they confront her? Did they still cast doubt on her identity, or had her truth shifted the narrative? As she locked eyes with this specter of her former self, a brewing storm of emotions marked a new awakening. The path to self-acceptance was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun. Standing backstage, Sarah marveled at the electrifying applause resonating through the venue. It was a cacophony of acceptance, but just beyond the raucous sea of hands clapping was the unsettling reminder of self-doubt. The familiar face emerging from the crowd was her former art professor, a figure who had once brushed off her talents, highlighting what she lacked rather than nurturing her potential. As their eyes met, a familiar rush of insecurity threatened to undermine her triumph. Yet, seated firmly in the center of her transformed self, Sarah felt the burgeoning strength she had forged through her journey. "You've grown," she silently reiterated, summoning the courage engraved in every brushstroke of her art. "This isn't a moment to retreat." Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward, ready to confront not just her past, but the critical voice that had often stifled her artistic expression. "Sarah," her professor began, uncertainty flickering in their eyes, "I must admit I didn't expect this." "Neither did I," Sarah cut in, surprising even herself. "But every stroke I created was my truth. This journey has taken me from deficiency and comparison to embracing my authentic voice, and that matters more than any rankings or titles." In that instant, a palpable shift occurred. She was no longer that timid artist in the shadows. Instead, she stood resolute, a vivid embodiment of self-acceptance. The conviction coursing through her veins held more weight than validation. It represented a monumental shift in her relationship with herself and her art. It was her internal revolution that mattered, and the sounds of the audience still cheering felt like a burgeoning wave carrying her toward uncharted territories. "Your exhibition reflects an evolution that speaks volumes," her professor replied, somewhat begrudgingly, but there was genuine admiration in their gaze. "You've conquered the hurdles that were holding you back." Validation poured over Sarah like warm sunlight, igniting an inner brightness that resonated through every fiber of her being. The show was more than just displaying her art. It was a transformation narrative, a personal triumph over the very comparisons that had once suffocated her. Stepping away from her professor, Sarah allowed her heart to swell with newfound confidence. She had learned not only to navigate the tumultuous waters of self-doubt, but also to embrace the beauty and the messiness of creation. As the evening progressed, Sarah found herself submerged in discussions about her pieces, each conversation growing more affirming than the last. Spectators shared how her art echoed their own struggles, a powerful lesson in empathy that she had yearned to realize. "It's okay to feel lost sometimes," she told one attendee, her heart swelling as they connected over shared vulnerabilities. With every story exchanged, she dismantled her barriers, demonstrating the ability of art to forge connections far beyond simple aesthetics. The chaotic tapestry of emotions woven into her work felt like bridges to other people's hearts, each compliment a stepping stone towards self-acceptance. By the time the evening wound down, Sarah's earlier nerves had dissolved into a warm glow of belonging. As she packed up her portfolio, the weight of the world no longer rested upon her shoulders. Instead, she felt buoyant, soaring through the afterglow of recognition and communal understanding. For the first time, she grasped the extensive breadth of her achievement. She had transformed not only her perception of success, but also her understanding of who she could be. Deep satisfactions thrummed beneath her skin, a solid confidence radiating from each moment embraced during the exhibition. As the applause died down and the last guests trickled into the cool night, Sarah found herself standing alone in the gallery, surrounded by the evidence of her hard work and honest expression. The stark contrast between her past self, measured against the degrees of others, and her present was staggering. In that quiet space, Sarah rendered a final pact with herself. She vowed to continue embracing her authenticity, knowing that growth thrives in vulnerability and that self-worth doesn't require external validation. She understood now that her narrative, shaped by trials and triumphs, was a cornerstone for her purpose as an artist. With resolute clarity, Sarah walked out into the night, vibrant colors still swirling in her heart. She had not only painted her journey, she had claimed it. Now was the moment for another leap, pursuing further exhibitions that celebrated her evolving artistry. Not only was she prepared to share her work, she was ready to confront new challenges and continue her growth. Transformation was no longer an end, but an exhilarating process that Sarah fully welcomed. And now, as she ventured boldly into the next phase, she called upon you, dear audience. Embrace your journey, confront your fears, and always seek your truth. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss. Next, exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share.